everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Tess Taylor, and I'm a Community Education Specialist at MDA. We're thrilled to have you join us for today's webinar at Home Physical Therapy for LGMD. This learning event is part of our larger MDA Community Education Program, which focuses on bringing the neuromuscular disease community together around education and resources. Be sure to visit the community education section on mda.org for updates on upcoming events, including the live Q&A for LGMD Awareness Day on September 30th, 2024 at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Our live Q&A will feature today's presenter, Dr. Molly Stark, as well as other neuromuscular professionals who can answer your questions regarding LGMD. For more information and to view other recent and upcoming LGMD webinars, please click on the link in the description box below. For nearly 75 years, MDA has led the way in funding research to accelerate the development of new treatments, expanding access to care and clinical trials through the MDA Care Center Network, and advocating for access and inclusion for the neuromuscular disease community. Now it is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Molly Stark. Molly is a physical therapist and clinical evaluator at the Greg Marzolf Jr. Muscular Dystrophy Center at the University of Minnesota. She received her Bachelor of Science and Doctorate of Physical Therapy degrees from the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. She has been a physical therapist for 11 years, and she has 8 years of experience working with children and adults with neuromuscular disease. Molly is a clinical evaluator and is involved in multiple clinical trials and research studies for individuals with neuromuscular diseases. Hi, Molly, and thank you for being here today. We're very excited for your presentation.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today to talk about exercise and at-home PT for limb-girdle muscular dystrophy. Like Tess said, I'm a physical therapist at the University of Minnesota in our Muscular Dystrophy Center. And I work with both peds and adults, so a lot of what I talk about will kind of be for both, but we'll just kind of jump in. So these are some of the main things we're going to talk about today. We'll start with talking about the benefits of exercise, which you may have heard before. And then we'll talk about limb-girdle muscular dystrophy, like the muscle physiology, just because I think it gives a good background on when you're selecting different exercise programs, why we do certain things and why there are certain precautions that we put in place. Then we'll talk about some considerations when starting an exercise program and some precautions to keep in mind, and then different types of exercise and ideas that I have for you that you might be able to do at home. So there's lots of benefits of exercise. Particularly in muscle disease, it could increase, maintain, or minimize the progressive loss of muscle strength. It might improve functional capacity, like doing things like climbing stairs, walking around your home, getting up off the couch, or rolling over in bed. It can improve the body's regulatory and response system, so it's just a little bit more aware and able to respond more quickly when you need to move. It may decrease the effects of the disease process. It also addresses the risk of disorders associated with obesity or a more sedentary lifestyle. And then it provides some cognitive and psychosocial benefits. So it kind of gives you the whole package. It is really important to exercise, and it's important to find the right way to exercise. So with that, we'll talk a little bit about muscles in limb-girdle. I know this is a busy slide, but I just want to point out a few key things, and we won't go super in depth on physiology. It's just to kind of give you a background. So in the top left, you see there's like a big muscle, slice of a muscle attached to a bone. Different muscle fibers make up a muscle, and all those fibers are in a bundle, and each fiber is a muscle cell. Muscle cells kind of have a membrane on the outside of them, and then inside they have the components that help them contract and work. And a lot of the things that are affected in any of the types of limb-girdle kind of affect how the membrane on the outside interacts with the pieces inside that really help a muscle to contract. On the bottom left, you can kind of see deeper inside of that muscle fiber, and you see like lots of little lines next to each other. Those little lines kind of are the proteins that help run along each other to contract a muscle when it needs to move, and they kind of grab on and pull. And then on the right, you'll see the image of lots of different proteins that can be affected in limb-girdle. Some of them are along that blue and yellow line. That's the membrane. That's like the outer part of the cell. And then inside those like lots of squiggly lines are the little fibers that kind of run along each other to help a muscle to contract. So you can see that everywhere can be affected. There's even proteins that help repair everything if there is damage. And you can imagine when all those little lines contract and they like squeeze a muscle cell tight, the membrane, if it's not properly attached or can't like react well, it starts to break down. And that's where we start to have some issues, and you can see some weakness and have discomfort. So then there's different types of contractions you can do with exercise or with just moving around in general. There's three main ones, and it has to do with what the muscle's doing as you're using it. So you can see on the bottom of this slide, those blue and yellow lines. Those are what we saw inside the muscle cell a second ago that kind of run along each other to contract. As they move along each other and shorten, they can shorten the muscle. So let's talk about your bicep here, like on your arm. Say you want to eat an apple and you take it from the table and you're able to bring it up towards your mouth. As you do it, the length of your bicep shortens and shortens and shortens to bring your hand up towards your mouth. As you're doing that, all those little muscle fibrils are kind of running along each other to shorten and get closer. And then you're ready to put it down. They kind of lengthen and spread back apart to their resting position as you put the apple back down on the table. So going up is concentric, going down is eccentric. It just means it's lengthening as you're doing it. And then isometric is, say you want to probably not share your apple with somebody, but share something else. You hold it out in front of you so that they'll take it. Your muscle is basically maintaining the same length so it can hold it in that position. So you can utilize all of these different movements in exercises. Some of them are less hard on the muscles than others. So eccentric is a little bit more hard on the muscles. You may have heard somebody say, like, don't do eccentric strengthening if you have any kind of muscle disease, just because it's more strenuous. Say instead of an apple, it's a bowling ball, and somebody hands you a bowling ball, and it's so heavy, it's hard to hold up, and so immediately it pulls your arm down. As you're pulling it down, your body doesn't want you to just let it collapse and drop the ball. It wants to control it as much as possible. And so all those little red and blue fibers are holding onto each other as much as they can as they're getting longer and longer. But as they're holding really hard, there might be some tearing and loss of integrity in the membrane itself because it's trying so hard to hold everything together. And that's where you can get muscle damage. You get damage in normal muscle when it's been overworked doing exercise, and that can take up to a full month for recovery if it's been really stressed. You can imagine that with a muscle disease, it can take even longer. And then with it, so say you have damage, say somebody gave you that bowling ball and your arm now is very sore after trying to lower it to the ground and not let it crash on your lap. All those little fibrils that were running along each other kind of have torn up a little bit. The muscle cells aren't as in good integrity. So you get some inflammation in the muscle cells themselves. That inflammation signals the body that, hey, something's going on here. These muscle cells aren't functioning properly, so they degenerate a little bit. And your body goes, okay, well, now that those degenerated, we got to replace those. We got to regenerate and make more muscle cells. So it tries to regenerate, but it doesn't have the right proteins to make the right components for the muscle. And so it puts in some fibrotic fatty tissue. And that's not contractile. It doesn't contract as you do things, so it doesn't help make your muscle belly itself any stronger. And then when you have fibrosis and you kind of try to contract a muscle, you get more inflammation because it's not functioning as properly, and it's kind of a vicious cycle that can go round and round. So you hear all that and you kind of go, okay, well, I won't exercise at all. That doesn't sound great for my muscles. But that's also not totally true because there's a lot of other factors that go into it. And there are safe ways to exercise, and we're going to talk about all of them. So one thing that we do use exercise for is to combat disuse atrophy, which is muscle wasting caused by not using the muscle. Basically, the body goes, okay, these muscles aren't being used as much. I'm not going to put energy into maintaining them. I have better things to do with my energy resources. So the body starts to break them down, and it decreases the size and the strength of the muscles. There are some studies showing, though, that regular submaximal exercise of various different types can maintain the muscle strength and prevent disuse atrophy in muscle disease. So that's why we're going to talk about it today. But before we get into the meat of all the exercises, there are some considerations that we got to talk about too. We kind of talked about this so far, but like the muscle fibers can be damaged by strenuous exercise, like overworking the muscle, overloading it. The eccentric contractions, where the muscle is lengthening as you're doing something, can be particularly hard on it. Some red flags for that to know that you've pushed it too far are muscle soreness after exercise, or a change in the color of your urine where it becomes darker. Strenuous exercise can also trigger acute heart or lung problem. The heart is a muscle. It can have similar issues to skeletal muscles. So you absolutely should talk to a cardiologist before you start any kind of exercise program, just to make sure that your heart and lungs are ready for it. And then I'll talk about some research along the way too, but I just want you to keep in mind that some of the research trials for exercise in limb-girdle are they're preliminary. They have a very small group of patients that they looked at. Some of them are 4 to 6 patients in a study, and it's hard to draw really strong conclusions from only a few patients like that. And the patients included in the studies had a wide variety of abilities. Everybody was very different, which kind of may not apply then to you and your situation. And every trial was designed differently. Some of them were 3-month studies, some were 6, someone had a really long follow-up. So it's hard to draw precise conclusions from that. However, they give us some good evidence that submaximal exercise is important. So that's why we'll talk about them. But because we don't have full great evidence to say, yes, this is definitely what you should do, it's really important to talk to your doctor, your neurologist, your physical therapist before you start an exercise program, just so they say, yes, your body's ready for this, or hey, here's some other things to consider for your case specifically. And then some precautions to keep in mind when you are exercising. After exercise, you shouldn't be so tired. Well, I should say you should be able to recover within an hour after exercise. If you're tired for more than an hour after exercising, that means you overworked your body. After exercise, you should be able to have enough energy to complete all of your self-care throughout the day, your work, whatever your roles and responsibilities are on a typical day. And you should have enough energy to complete your daily mobility, like transferring, walking around your house if you do that, climbing stairs, whatever your typical baseline is, you should be able to maintain that. And any red flags that would make you go, okay, I need to scale back, or I need to talk to a professional again, would be muscle soreness the day or two after exercising, that fatigue that lasts more than an hour. And then if you experience increased falls or stumbling, it means your body just doesn't have the energy to keep up and help you move around like it should. All right, and then some things to consider when you are starting a program. One of the biggest things is that rest is just as important as the exercise itself. When you're exercising, building in rest breaks throughout it is really important to check in with your body and see how you're doing. It's important to stay hydrated before, during, and after exercise. Muscle cells do a lot better when they're hydrated, so they'll be at their peak performance if they are well hydrated. Choose the right activities is important, and not everybody's created equal. There's different exercises for kids versus adults. And then some are more appropriate for the level that you're at versus other people. It's important to start a program very slowly to see how your body responds, and then gradually increase the intensity. The scale on the right is an RPE scale. It's a rating of your perceived exertion. It can be used for lots of different types of exercise, whether it's strengthening or aerobic. I would never go, let's see, this scale is ranked 0 to 10. 10 is like max, like you couldn't do anything else. You're exhausted for the rest of the day, you're sore after. It is basically pushing your body to the limit. 0 is just sitting down, hanging out, playing cards, or whatever you like to do. So when you exercise, I would go up to the level 6, like a moderate intensity, where you feel like, okay, I worked hard, that was good, but I can still go on and do what else I need to do after this. I'm just tired in the moment. And then most importantly is finding things you really like to do. We'll talk about a variety of things, but everybody's different and likes different stuff. So if you try something, you're like, it's okay, move on, try something new. There's lots of different ways to move your body and exercise. All right. So now we're going to talk about the different types of exercise, and I'll give you some examples. So we'll talk about stretching, range of motion of your joints. We'll talk about balance and how incorporating that into a program is important. We will talk about strengthening and resistance training, aerobic exercise, including swimming in a pool or aquatic therapy, and biking or ergometry. And then we'll talk about respiratory muscle training, which might not be something on your list that you've had in your exercise program before. So we'll start with stretching. So stretching can do lots of different things for you. It can maintain the mobility of the joint itself, and it can also help prevent or manage contractures. Contractures are like a tightness of the muscle around the joint that just doesn't allow it to move as fully as it could. They can help with promoting function, like if you maintain the motion, say in your knee joint more, so it doesn't get too tight, it may help you walk longer distances or be able to transfer better. Helps with decreasing pain. Sometimes that muscle tightness can be uncomfortable. It helps with decreasing the muscle stiffness and increases blood flow to muscle by getting it moving. There's lots of different ways that you can stretch, whether it's an orthotic or splint, where it's something you're in for a longer period of time, or manual stretching, where someone helps you or you are helping yourself to stretch. If someone helps you, I would just encourage you to have really good communication with that person, making sure that they're not pushing your stretch into a range that's painful. It should just feel like a good stretch and not be uncomfortable. You can hold stretches for different amounts of time. A very standard amount of time is 30 seconds, and you do it 3 times in a row, whether you or somebody else is helping you. But if you're using splints or positioning techniques or an orthotic to stretch, like say you have night splints that you wear at night to keep your ankle in a good position, those should be worn longer, ideally for at least 60 minutes in a 24-hour period, if not more, because that'll help maintain and potentially improve the length of your joint or your muscle. Stretching is one of the things that should be done up to daily, ideally, just to maintain or improve muscle length. And you really need to pick the joints that are important for you to focus on. Everybody has tightness in different joints. Some of the common ones are in the ankles, hamstrings, or hips, just because you may spend a lot of your time or all of your time sitting, and those can get very tight. So then we'll talk about ways to stretch. There are lots of ways to stretch. This is where I think it's key to talk to a therapist to pick out the joints in you that you want to prioritize. But some of them are the hips, hamstrings, ankles, like we talked about. Your trunk can get tight, your shoulders, elbows, and forearms. Stretching can be done in any position. You could be sitting, standing, on your back, on your belly, on your side. Whatever is a comfortable position for you. Some people like to do it first thing in the morning, getting out of bed, or like to do it throughout the day if they're in their chair. These are just some examples of different stretches you can do to expand your chest, move your arms, stretch your back. You can do like a hamstring stretch up on a chair or prop it on a stool. Maybe if you're a power chair and your legs elevate, you could bring that up to stretch periodically throughout the day. The biggest thing with stretching is you shouldn't feel pain. it should feel a little like, okay, I'm being stretched. That's not super comfortable, but it should not be painful. You don't need to do the full range of motion for a stretch in order to feel like a stretch. So you'll see with like pictures you see, they'll go through the full motion. Go to what your comfort level is, and where you start to feel a stretch. And then I wouldn't incorporate bouncing into any of your stretches, whether you're doing it or someone's helping you. It can just stress the muscle a little bit too much and push it beyond the length that it really should be going. Okay, and then standing is an exercise. Standing is a really important exercise for everybody to do. There's lots of different benefits. One is that it can help with stretching. It's like that prolonged positioning of stretching your hips and your hamstring and your ankles. It promotes really good bone health because that weight through your bones is important for it to lay down new bone so that the bone density improves, and it can prevent the risk of fractures from being quite as high. It enables you to be upright. If you are typically sitting throughout the day, it helps you be upright, which is great for your trunk posture. It promotes GI motility to get everything moving. And it's great for your heart and lungs to not be compressed quite so much by everything pushing up on it. And it challenges the circulatory system to send blood flow throughout your body. This one, standing should be done for up to 60 minutes per day. When you start a program, it can certainly be less, but up to 60 minutes is a good goal to aim for as you build up to that. However, 60 minutes does not need to be in one session. The amount you're standing is cumulative. So maybe you have a power chair that is able to stand, or maybe you have a stander that you can get in easily a few times a day, or maybe you walk around independently, but spend a lot of your day sitting. Anyway, if you can stand multiple times throughout the day for shorter periods of time, they should just add up to about an hour once you've kind of like gone through training to get up to that point. This is another one kind of like stretching that if you can aim for daily, it's really important. It's one of the best things that you can do for your body is to be upright for a period of time. Okay, and then balance. Balance is great because it can train your balance systems. It can help with fall preventions. It can improve your sitting or your standing balance. Yeah, it's very important to incorporate in your program. You have multiple different systems in your body that contribute to balance. You have three main ones. So one is your visual system, your eyes. So you can see like, okay, where's the horizon? What is upright? And then another system is your vestibular system or your inner ears. That can kind of tell you like, okay, I'm tipped this way or I'm tipped this way. And they kind of know like what's up and down. That's why if you've ever been on a boat, you can feel kind of like wobbly. And when you get off the boat, you still feel like, oh, I don't know what's upright because it's kind of messed with your inner ear. And then you have your proprioceptive system, which is basically part of, it's a bunch of receptors throughout your body that send signals through your nervous system to tell you like what your joints are doing. Is my arm up or is it down? So if you close your eyes, say you lift your finger up, you'll know if you're, or say somebody else lifts your finger up, you'll know that your finger's up without even having to look at it because you can feel where in space your joint is. All these systems can be trained by taking away one of the other systems. They work together all day long, all three of them together, but if you take out one, the other two go, okay, we got to step up our game. We need to really work hard. And that's where they get trained to do better. There's lots of different ways you can practice balance training. You could design a home program with a physical therapist to kind of give you ideas. Maybe you're into martial arts. That's really good for balance and holding positions. Same with yoga. There's games like on the Wii where you can do balance games, and you can do a lot of these in sitting or standing. Balance just doesn't have to be your standing balance. There's also sitting balance, like reaching outside of your base of support and making sure you can like come back to the middle where you need to be to sit up safely. This one, frequency doesn't have to be as much as the last ones we've talked about. This should be 3 to 5 times a week, incorporating it throughout as you can. Next, I'll show you a few different ideas of different things you can try if you're able to stand or sit. So weight shifting can be done in standing or sitting, where you're like shifting side to side and kind of pushing your limits, making sure that if you do go too far, you have a way to get back up, whether it's somebody supporting you or you have some support on the sides so you can push yourself up. And then same thing front to back, leaning all the way forward and back. You can use your hands if you go down too low and need to help push yourself back up. Both of these can also be done in standing. If you're standing with your feet normal width apart, or if they're a little closer, shifting side to side, shifting front and back. Other standing ones, this progression shows making it more challenging to stand with your feet right next to each other. It's harder to stand with your feet next to each other than apart because it narrows your base of support. And then the easiest way to do it is with your arms out to the side. If you're able, next easiest is arms by your side, and then the hardest is with them across because it just puts everything stacked right over your feet and doesn't give you the ability to correct your balance using your arms. So this is also a progression, is having your feet right next to each other or your feet staggered. So like say you're going to take a little step and put them one kind of in front of the other, or you can sneak one right in front of the other if you want it to be extra hard. And then the hardest would be picking up one foot so that you're just standing on one foot. You can go through this same progression of arms out, arms down by your side, or arms across your chest within all of those different foot positions. And then strengthening is one I suppose is probably the most controversial because it can cause damage, but it can also be really beneficial. And that's where some of the research comes into play that we'll talk about. Strengthening should be done anywhere from 2 to 4 times a week. 3 is probably a good number to aim for, kind of like every other day. Things to consider when you're doing a strengthening program is to definitely include a warm-up and a cool down, mainly for your heart benefit, to like get it ready to exercise your muscles. Avoid the eccentric and high resistance that we talked about. Low resistance and gradually increasing the number of reps is better than gradually increasing the weight. There have been lots of different studies, or there have been some different studies that have been done on limb girdle and exercise. There was a 3-month exercise program, like a resistance program, where they did a warm-up and a cool down. And between those, they did step-up exercises, they did squats, they did knee extension, where they were like kicking up with their leg, and knee flexion, like bending their knee with resistance. For that, they found that the patients after 3 months had a 13% increase in their strength in the muscle groups that they were working, and that they were faster when they were doing like a sit to stand test and when they were climbing 4 steps. All of those patients were ambulatory, and they had mild to moderate disease, but they didn't look at safety. They didn't test their CK, so I can't speak to that about how it was tolerated. Some of the other ones did that we'll talk about. So there was another one that they designed a home program specifically for each participant in the study, where they did a lot of what we've just talked about: balance, range of motion, strengthening. They included aerobic, which we'll talk about soon. And they went through the whole training program, and they found at the end of treatment that everybody was slightly weaker on average. And they said it was typical for the disease progression. They kind of looked like they just experienced disease progression, not that they were worse than they would have been. They thought that it actually reduced the severity and effect of the disease process. And they found that pain and fatigue increased with repetitive and overloading exercises that were too much or working overhead. And then one other study that I'll talk about was a really good one that showed they looked at both high intensity and low intensity training. For this one, they exercised, for the low intensity one, they did 6 months of exercise, and they did it in the arms and legs for individuals who are ambulatory that had mild to moderate disease presentation. They started at kind of a lower percentage of what their max amount they could lift is. They found their max and they went down to like 40% of their max and gradually increased it every week for 6 months. Everyone's strength improved when they were doing this, and nobody had elevations in their CK, which, as you know, shows muscle damage. That enzyme is released anytime there's muscle damage. So having it stay the same was great. On the other hand, they also did a high intensity training in that same study where the patients did as many reps as possible at 60% of what their max was until they couldn't lift anymore, like until they had muscle failure where they just like couldn't lift and had to set the weight down. Within I'm not sure how long, not too far into the study, they had 2 of the 6 patients drop out because their CKs elevated and they had muscle pain. So that kind of shows that the high intensity training was too much for those individuals. I should mention too, that study was all limb girdle 2I and 2A, which I know it's very hard to, we can't generalize and say just because it worked or didn't work for one type could work the other, but that's the data that we have right now. Okay, so all with that being said, low intensity is okay. As long as you're monitoring how you feel as you're doing the exercise and after the exercise. There's different ways that you can different ways you can strengthen your body and your muscles. Body weight exercise is just that. It's just using the weight of your body to move it in different ways against gravity. So it might be doing sit to stands in and out of a chair, might be doing step ups on the bottom step of a flight of steps, maybe marching or sitting in place. Marching in place or marching while you're sitting for core strength and for hip strength. Maybe it's wall push-ups like this image is demonstrating where you're pushing up against the wall, which is not as strenuous as when you're on the floor doing push-ups. Or wall washing where you're against the wall, like washing, but you have the stability of the wall to help maintain your control and support your arm. Otherwise, you can also add in equipment. You can do resistance bands. You can do light hand weights. Those are things, especially with those, I would talk to a therapist before you start using any of them. But there are some great upper body programs and lower body programs that you can do from a chair, from standing, or laying down for any of those. So a lot of the strengthening that I mentioned was talking about your limbs, talking about your arms and legs. The core is also incredibly important because you're stable, it's your base. If your core isn't strong, it's really hard to maintain movement and stability in your arms and legs. So core work can be done in all different positions. So find whatever's best for you, whether it's laying down, sitting up, on your hands and knees, kneeling, standing. You can really be in any position as long as you're moving your core in some way or tightening your core muscles. So in core, you can do reaching activities, pulling activities. Like TheraBands are really helpful when you're doing core work to like pull against it or pull against it, lean against it. You can do side bending things. You can do rotating, different weight shifting, even like tipping your pelvis one way and then tipping back the other way if you have that mobility in your spine. And really using your core muscles to help move that instead of your back. You can also do holds where if you're just sitting upright and you tighten your abdominal muscles, tighten them and hold them while you're still continuing to breathe is the trick. Otherwise, more advanced ones would be like doing a plank on your toes or on your knees, or a side plank, or doing bridging. This image of the woman doing bridging is great, where she's lifting her butt up. That really strengthens your butt muscles and your back. But if getting off the floor isn't for you, or getting your butt up off the floor isn't for you, the little lifting is okay. That still strengthens your muscles too. In this position, you can also do a tilt where you're like tilting your pelvis back towards you, back and forth, kind of like rocking it. And that's really good for your core muscles to have them engaged in pulling your pelvis back and forth. Then there's also chair Pilates, there's Tai Chi, there's lots of kind of community classes you could do that focus on core stability and strengthening. Okay, and then aerobic exercise is one of the other big forms of exercise that's been studied and looked at a lot because it's really important for your skeletal system, all of your muscles, but also for your heart and lungs. There's lots of different ways that you can do aerobic exercise. A lot of people really like swimming or aquatic therapy. You can do video game-based activities like using the Wii. You can do upper or lower extremity biking or ergometry, whether it's on a bike or on a new step, or doing them with like pedal ergometer in your house. You could have a walking program if you're able to walk, do a yoga program that's more fast moving for the aerobic component. Wheelchair sports are really good because it gets your heart and lungs breathing as you're doing any kind of like power soccer, hockey, or anything like that. And then dance programs, whether it's in the community or in your house, are really good too. For the duration for this, I would go up to about 30 minutes, but same as other ones, I would start with a low amount of time and kind of work your way up to that 30 minutes. And this one I would include 3 times a week, kind of every other day. It could be alternating with strength. So you get strength on one day and then aerobic exercise on another day. There are a few papers published that suggest aerobic activity or aerobic exercise is safe and might increase oxidative capacity and muscle function in both LGMD 2I, 2L, and 2A. Not to say that it can't in the other types, but those are the ones that have been studied and reported in the literature. Another thing to keep in mind is that people with neuromuscular disease have a higher risk of developing secondary disorders that are associated with a secondary lifestyle. So an aerobic program can improve long-term health and quality of life and combat some of those sedentary factors. There was a study published for endurance training on LGMD 2I that found 3 months of low intensity, so like not their max amount of like breathing ability and heart ability, but a lower intensity of that was safe and effective. They found after 3 months they had improved physical endurance, they had improved leg strength, and improved walking distance. And it was safe. The CK increased slightly, but it was nothing to be, or not enough to be significant. So we'll talk about 2 different types of aerobic exercise more specifically because there's some that are more popular. Aquatic therapy is great because it's a whole body exercise. It's also hard because it's a whole body exercise. So there's things to keep in mind in terms of safety. You get the benefits of being in warm water therapy if you're doing aquatic therapy in particular versus doing lap swimming at any pool. The warm water is great for the muscles because it helps stretch the ones that are tight. Like a warmer muscle is more flexible and extensible, so you get a little bit more out of it. And a cold muscle can have a harder time contracting and being at its full strength. The water provides resistance, like when you're pushing against the water, it's resistance for your body and your muscles to push against. It's great endurance training for your heart and your lungs, and it's low impact. It takes the pressure off of your bones, your joints, and your muscles because you don't have that pounding into the ground that is not very forgiving. So what to include? For sure, a warm-up and a cool-down. Kind of like a lot of these, it's important to slowly get into an exercise and then slowly come out of it for your heart and your lungs. And then within it, you can kind of pick what you like. If it's strengthening exercises, you can do more like resistance against the water, use different tools within the water to like push against. You can do aerobic exercises where it's more like getting your heart rate up, or stretching exercises because your muscles are going to be warm and more loose and are able to stretch more easily. These ones, it takes a lot of effort to get in and out of the pool, which can take a lot of energy. So that's one thing to consider when you're choosing how long you'll be in the pool to start with. I would start with a lower amount of time and then gradually increase up to 45 minutes if you're able, but 30 is a good mark. It's just so hard to get in there that you want to make it worth your time, but also not wear yourself out completely for the rest of the day. And then the other type of aerobic exercise is ergometry. This is assisted cycling. There are ergometers that provide some motor support, so they do 50% or 25% of the work while you do the other part, or there's ones that don't help you at all. You can do it both for your arms or your legs. Sometimes you can use the same machine for either option and just have it up on the table to work your arms and down on the ground for your legs. They might have different handles to go into depending on the device. Limitations for this is that it can be really tiring. It's an exhausting exercise. So you need to be mindful of how you're doing as you're going through it and how you feel afterwards. And then contractures can be limiting for this. Like if you have tightness behind your knees, it may be hard to fully extend and pedal, and maybe being in the pool might work better for you. And then respiratory muscle training is one maybe you've talked about before, maybe you haven't. The benefits of training your respiratory muscles are they maintain your heart and lung function. They might help maintain a productive cough if you were to get sick. They decrease your risk of pneumonia and help reduce the shortness of breath that you might be experiencing. The duration for each of the exercises that I'll go through is like up to 1 minute, but when you start them, I would start pretty low, 10 or 15 seconds, because some of these might make you feel lightheaded or feel kind of funny if you're breathing in a way that you're not used to breathing and your body needs to adapt. These are another one that I would incorporate if you can up to daily, because it's really important. Your lungs are obviously really important, so it's good to maintain the muscles around them. You can see in this image, there's lots of different muscles that attach to the ribs. Some of them help them to expand, and some of them help them to contract and to push the air back out. Training muscle strength of the respiratory muscles is very different than addressing lung function. Lung function is addressed by a pulmonologist, and they're thinking about the health of your lungs themselves. Respiratory muscle training, it's kind of within that realm, but it's really the muscles on the outside of the rib cage, not what's inside the rib cage. So here are some different respiratory muscle or respiratory training recommendations. One of them is opening the chest. So if you have your arms kind of straight, slightly in front of you, and you bring them backwards while you're taking a big breath in, and then exhale as you're bringing your arms forward to let the air come out. Shoulder shrug, same thing, but you're going up this time. So when you're inhaling, lift your shoulders up. And then when you're exhaling, bring them back down. As you bring them back down, you can also go back, like you're doing a circle, counterclockwise, depending what you're doing, or clockwise. If you're bringing them forward, you can go back and forth. Just remember, inhale on your way up and exhale on your way down. And then the beach ball exercise is the one that you see imaged here, where you're expanding your stomach while you inhale. And then as you exhale, breathe out and your belly comes in and kind of back up. This is really good to expand your diaphragm and have it do some training. Sniffles is quickly breathing in and out through your nose, and see how long you can repeat this. This is one for sure. I would start small, 10 or 15 seconds of going where you're breathing in and out. It's really quick. It's really good for your diaphragm to strengthen it, but it can make you a little lightheaded because you're breathing so quickly and not oxygenating properly. Huffing is where you take a deep breath in and then you force the air out as quickly as possible. It might cause you to cough, but it looks like this, where you breathe in and then you huff it out and it makes you kind of cough at the end. But that can help strengthen your cough for when you do need a productive cough if you were to get sick. Maximum phonation time. So this helps with your ability to talk for a longer period of time before you need to stop and catch your breath and keep talking more. This involves taking a deep breath and then letting out while you make the sound ah. So you say ah as long as you can. See how long you can go before you need to stop and take a breath in. This really helps with, like I said, voice projection or voice tolerance, talking longer till you need to take a breath, and your projection, so you can speak more loudly and be heard in public settings where it's noisier. And then breath stacking is one you might have heard from a pulmonologist if you see them. This is where you take a deep breath in, you take a deep breath out, let all your air out, take a breath in, hold it at the top for a little bit, then take another breath on top of that, hold it for a little bit, and then take another breath. So you feel like you're as full as you possibly can, like you're gonna burst, and then slowly let your air back out. Rest a little while, and then try that again. All right, that's all the different types of exercise that I have for you and the examples. Now comes to actually incorporating it. This is where it gets tricky because we're busy, have busy lives. A lot of times the best thing you can do is find ways to insert it into your routine so you can incorporate it throughout the day rather than just being like, okay, gotta put this on my list. I gotta go to the pool or whatever it is. How can you get it fitted in throughout your day? Maybe it's doing some stand-up sit downs before you get up from the table, doing an extra 3 to 5 of them to strengthen your legs. Maybe it's keeping your resistance bands, your hand weights by the TV if you watch TV in the evenings, and you can do some exercises while you're watching it. Maybe it's doing little squats or toe or heel raises while you're at the sink if you're washing your hands. Maybe you could do some of the breathing exercises right before you brush your teeth. You can look in the mirror and be like, all right, am I doing this right? How do I look while I'm doing it? You could do some of your stretching either first thing when you wake up in the morning or before you go to bed while you're laying in bed if you like to do it laying down. Our phones are really great for setting reminders in your alarms or your calendar. Say, hey, try this. Hey, do this. It's the middle of the day. Got to move. Or your watch might have a reminder, time to move. Well, maybe it means it's time to do breathing exercise or time to do a pelvic tilt to strengthen your abdominal muscles. And then talk to your friends and family. Exercise buddies are the best. They kind of keep us accountable and you can keep them accountable for doing the exercise. And then it always feels good to see where you've come from and where you are now. So logging your progress, whether it's how many repetitions you're doing, what types of exercise you're doing it, how long you're doing it for, how many months you've been doing it for, whatever it is that makes you feel like, yes, I'm doing it, I'm accomplishing my goal. Setting goals is really great. It keeps you kind of motivated on task to get where you want to be. And then the last thing I'll say is just like, think about what you really want to do. If you don't have a way that you're exercising or being active now, what do you enjoy? See if you can find a way to do it, whether it's on your own or with a therapist helping you. There's lots of different adaptive sports, great ways to get in the pool or engage with other people. So really consider what you could do. All right, that's it for me. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks for participating and sharing some interest in exercise with Limb-Girdle. I really appreciate it. And best of luck in starting your program. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly, for your presentation today, and we look forward to speaking with you more at our LGMD Q&A for LGMD Awareness Day on September 30th. Now, if you are new to MDA and have been diagnosed with a neuromuscular disease under MDA's umbrella, or if you are a loved one of someone who is diagnosed, we encourage you to stay engaged with us at MDA. You can do this by visiting mda.org/join and completing a short form. Joining is free and will keep you up to date on the latest research, educational programs, and supports that MDA has to offer. MDA's community education team would like to invite you to our upcoming in-person and virtual events. We are always adding more opportunities to learn with us, so use the QR code on your screen or check in the description box below to get involved with the MDA community. If you're watching from the future, not to worry. All of our virtual learning programs are available for on-demand viewing, and live educational opportunities are updated regularly at mda.org. You can learn more about these events by visiting our website. MDA will be hosting 4 in-person symposiums this fall across the country. Join us for these half-day multi-session programs with both disease-specific learning and general learning sessions that are applicable to all neuromuscular diseases. As always, these events are free to the MDA community. Registration on our website. We would love to hear your questions and comments about today's webinar. Please feel free to contact MDA's Resource Center at 1-833-ASK-MDA1 or email resourcecenter@mdausa.org, and we will be sure to get back to you. Thank you again to Dr. Molly Stark for joining us today. This concludes our webinar, and we will see you on September 30th. Bye.